Hello and welcome to Monday's morning briefing with Hearts Standard. I'm James Cairney and today I'm joined by Scott McIntosh from Amariso Let's It Run. How you doing, Scott?
Yeah, all good. Thanks very much for having me on, James.
Always a pleasure. Always good to have you on. So today we're going to be looking back at yesterday's match at Ibrox, where basically, I think it's safe to say Hearts got off to a very good start. You know, they took the lead after, I think it was 5 minutes through Lawrence Shankland and looked as if they kind of set up to try and frustrate Rangers, try and make life difficult for them. For large spells of the game, it looked like that was the case. Obviously, towards the end of the second half, you get that onslaught that you know is always going to be coming if you're at Ibrox or Parkhead. And in the end, Hearts weren't able to withstand it because there was first a penalty given away by Peter Haring, one that was the referee had to go over to the VAR monitor for a review of, and then decided that was a penalty. They scored, and then a couple of minutes later there was the winning goal from Danilo, who was a substitute at halftime for Rangers. So, I guess, Scott, what are your initial thoughts on the game and I guess on the result and the performance as well then? Because obviously this is a match where Hearts fans would have been going into it looking for a lot of positives, looking for reasons to believe that next week's of the upcoming semi-final is a game that they can win. Do you feel more or less confident of that now?
I think if you were to speak to Hearts fans prior to the game yesterday and sort of asked what they were realistically hoping to get out of it, I think it would be more about individual performances, a desire to learn from last week in terms of management and players, and then potentially, like you're saying there, anything that can sort of give you reason to hope for next week's fixture at Hampden as well. And I think we did get all of that. Now, there's things that I think we'll probably have a chance to discuss later on today in terms of individual errors and maybe tactical tweaks that maybe didn't work out. But I think by and large, yesterday was a positive. And I think given the backdrop of sort of negativity that there's been just now regarding our performances of late, I think you've got to try and hang on to that. So I think the advice I would give to fans is, albeit it's a really disappointing end result, and there's certainly things that we could have done better, particularly in the second half, I think you do have to, pay some acknowledgement to the positives that came out of yesterday as well.
No, I guess I think that's right. I think it's always easy after these kind of games, particularly given the manner of it, just to be annoyed, be frustrated, go it's happened again. The team don't know what they're doing, blah blah blah. But like you say, I think that there was actually a fair bit that Hearts did get right in that game, and that's not to say it was perfect. Like you say, there were mistakes as well. There were perhaps decisions that shouldn't have been made, but I think on the whole, I think that Hearts competed for 90 whatever minutes it was in a game that they have to compete in if they want to finish third. So I think that there's a lot of positives, especially when you compare it to the Celtic game the week prior, where Hearts were just off it from the get-go and never looked as if they're going to get anything from that. So I guess we'll start off by talking a wee bit about the team selection. So obviously Naismith he changed the formation. So there was a back three, almost a back five in practice, to be honest. So it was Kai Rose, Frankie Kent and Toby Civic making up the back three, with Ofaya on the right and Alex Cochrane on the left. And in front of them, they had Benny Beningame playing a kind of holding defensive midfield role with Neuenhoff and who was the other midfielder again?
George Grant.
George Grant, thank you. Yeah, George Grant, the other side of him, and then obviously Vargas and Shankland up top. So, what did you make of that? That when you saw the team come out, were you surprised at all? Did you think that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We obviously discussed on Friday's show that we sort of felt that reverting to a back three would be a good option, but I think we both kind of felt that he wouldn't do that. So I think it was a bit of a nice surprise. Again, with back threes / back fives, it's not so much about the formation, but rather the sort of intent within that formation that can sort of dictate whether it's been a good decision or not. I think what you could see from the offset, and it was evident in the goal that was scored, that although it was a back five, I think you've got the flexibility because Kai Rolls can sort of cover over that left-hand side. There's a bit of flexibility within it to just sort of shift people along a little bit and sort of push Alex Cochrane a bit higher up the park. So it was a 5 out of possession, but I think when we had possession, I did see a lot of positivity from the team. I think Cochrane was finding himself sort of playing a bit higher up the park than O'Fire. And then it just allows O'Fire to sort of just, drop into right back and then just, move everyone else over a slot. So I think there was a degree of flexibility within the system, and it was encouraging to see. And I think no one can argue, regardless of the different opinions on how the game ended out and how we could have done things differently. I don't think anyone can argue the initial team selection. I think on the evidence of that first half, it certainly did work.
No, I think you're right, because, like you say, there's always going to be a big onus on particularly the wing backs and the kind of the two wider central midfielders, I think, in order to get forward support attacks and make sure that Vargas and Shanklin didn't have to do it all themselves against the Rangers defence. And to be fair, I think there's quite a few points in the first half where Hearts did do that. I think that, like you say, there the mentality, or the kind of the attitude of the players when they are in possession, when they've got the ball, that's really important. And I think if you start this like kind of hoofing it and playing direct, like really direct, you can quickly run into trouble against Celtic or Rangers. But what we saw was actually there were spells where Hearts had the ball, particularly in the first half, where they were quite calm. They were moving the ball, getting it forward, and kind of exploiting little gaps that had opened up. And I think part of that was probably down to the fact I don't think Rangers pressed particularly aggressively in the first half. I think they were quite happy to set off the Hearts defence, and then that obviously allowed the team to get further up the park, which made them look a lot better. So I think that definitely played its part. But again, I think this goes back to something that Naismith constantly talks about, the players constantly talk about it too, is that, the need to be braver on the ball. And I think we did see that bravery in the opening 45 minutes at Ibrox, where players were committing forward, and they were getting numbers forward. And like you say, the goal arrived out of that, because it was a throw in, maybe halfway into Rangers' half. But, Ofaya was taking it, Beningame was getting right involved, Rose were quite high up, Cochrane was very high up on the far side, obviously. So it did show that when the players do commit, when they do have that opportunity and they seize it, they can still hurt teams of the calibre of Celtic and Rangers, I think. So, yeah, I think overall it was a pretty encouraging first half. Obviously, there was a couple of hairy moments, like Shanklin clearing the ball off the goalie's line. That was very, very close to going in. And obviously, of course, the penalty as well. Another individual mistake from Toby Sibic as well, which is a shame, obviously, coming so soon after the Edinburgh derby.
Yeah, to try and give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt, I think there's an element of it that's brought on by the change in personnel with Fire coming off with that injury. And I think Toby finds himself, I think positionally speaking, he's a little bit out of kilt. He's a bit too, he's not quite in the right position for a right wing back to start off when that attack begins for Rangers. And then he's sort of having to try and recover for that. And he sort of sticks, I would say he sticks the wrong leg out, if I'm being completely honest. But he does have a sort of tendency to sort of try and always tackle with his right leg. So yeah, it's not great. I mean, I did say at halftime when I was sort of putting a little sort of tweet update up that it's those little bits of luck that you need. You need a few things to sort of win at Ibrox or Parkhead. You need all your players to be on it. You need them to have an off day, and you need a bit of luck. And at halftime, it looked like all three of those things were definitely happening for us. So yeah, I think again it does come under an individual error, but there's slightly mitigating circumstances regarding the change. That did seem to cause a little bit of an imbalance towards the end of that first half when Kingsley had to come on.
No, I think it's a fair point. I think it's a good point to make as well. We still actually don't know what's wrong with Ofaya, but obviously we all hope that he's back to full fitness shortly. But just because the Hearts have got no numbers in there anymore, I think if he comes out, you need to pray that Kingsley's back and ready to play 90 minutes, because otherwise you can run into some difficulty very quickly. I guess we've sort of touched on it. I guess we've been kind of alluding to it so far, but the first half performance and the second half performance, do you think there was a change? Do you think something did change at the break?
I think so, yeah. For me, in the first half, we had Vargas playing sort of as the main focal point up top, and Shanklin was dropping deep. And it was pretty much just a standard sort of 5-3-2 or 5-3-1-1. Now, I understand there's been a lot of fans that have questioned the sort of value that Vargas brought yesterday. Now, in terms of whenever he was on the ball, he didn't offer a lot. There was a point just leading up to that first penalty where Vargas is on the edge of the box and he loses possession. That allows Rangers to sort of break quickly and win that first penalty. So although I agree with people that his contribution on the ball wasn't particularly brilliant over the piece of the whole 90 minutes, I did think that having him playing on the shoulder of Goldson and Davis was giving them a problem. And it meant there was 2 or 3 times in the first half where we were struggling to maybe play out from the back, and what Cochran and Ofai had done pretty astutely was just sort of knock a ball just down the line, turn their defenders, and it won us a throw-in. And it just allows you that sort of breathing room. And they tweaked it at half time. They sort of pulled Vargas out wide, and it didn't work for me. Again, he wasn't offering anything on the ball, but then we had no real out ball either, because Shanklin was still sort of really dropping deep as he had been in the first half. And he had a really good game. I'm not knocking what Shanklin done individually. He looked really on it yesterday. But yeah, the decision to pull Vargas out wide was probably the one main sort of contentious decision that I would say I have with yesterday. That some people have mentioned the substitutions. I think there was an element of bad luck in that. They were planning on bringing on Oda, and then Sibic pulls up with an injury, so they have to sort of again, make that decision to bring on Halliday instead and switch Devlin over to the right side. So that I think, to be fair, with the substitutions, I can understand why they're made and when they're made. But for me, the decision to pull Vargas out wide, I did think that saw us lose a bit of our attacking impetus, and it kind of led to us retreating back 5-10 yards in terms of a whole team as well. And we nearly got away with it. You're talking fine margins. It was 1-0 up until close to the 90th minute, but I think we were asking for trouble by just being so deep for such a lengthy period of time.
John, it's interesting because Graham Duthie makes a similar point from Facebook. He's saying he'd have liked to have seen us playing more balls in behind goals than for Vargas, as Vargas had the beating of him, which is kind of similar to what you're saying there in the first half, where in the he was at least able to offer that option and give them something to worry about, I think. And I think you're right. I think things definitely did change in the second half, and I think that maybe 5-10 minutes into it, the shape changed a little bit as well. It looked as if, like we said, Vargas, rather than playing with Shankland up top, he played out right essentially at first, and then I can't remember who it was who dropped to left mid, but they weren't on for very long. It was Grant, that was it, and then obviously Alan Forrest came on for him not long afterwards. So I thought it was I thought it was an interesting decision to make, to be honest. Like you say, I think it definitely blunted Hearts going forward, and it sort of left Shankland a bit on his own, a bit isolated up top. You can only imagine it was done to try and add a bit more layer of defensive security out wide. Maybe Naismith was clearly seen and maybe thought that Rangers' fullbacks were getting a bit too involved in the game. Maybe he's trying to stop Tavernier crossing it into the box with good reason, as we saw for the winning goal. So maybe, I guess it was that, but I think that I guess I was a little bit surprised at the time, just because it looked as if Hearts were trying to kind of seize the initiative at a time where I don't think they had to. I think it was working up until that point. I don't think they had to make. I don't think there really was a requirement to make too many changes or start tinkering with things. Obviously, as well, we had even you alluded to it earlier, but with Sibic going off as well, you had Cammy Devlin finishing up at right wing back. Now, like you see, that's more out of necessity than desire. I don't think anyone would have planned for Devlin to finish the game out there. But again, it's one of those things again where it does. He's not suited to it. It's not what he's good at, I don't think. And again, it's just that way where while in the first half those little bits of luck seemed to go in Hearts' way in terms of the penalty and Shank clearing the ball off the line, it kind of felt as if then towards the second half we're on those little bits of luck.
The luck was
going against them.
I mean, I suppose the only thing you could have done alternatively to that switch was put Forrest in at right wing back, have Halliday play on the left, and just keep Cammy in his position. Again, I can only make these judgments by using the old eye test. I don't have any of that sort of live data that the management team will have when they're making some of these decisions, and similar to the decision they made at halftime to sort of tweak things slightly. So I suppose we've got to try and give them the benefit of the doubt, but that's an alternative you could have went for. I think all three of those players would have been more comfortable than, say, having Devlin playing that right wing back role. He didn't look comfortable there at all. Albeit it doesn't really have a direct consequence to either of the two goals, but it doesn't help in terms of us trying to sort of retain possession.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I guess, I mean, you touched on it earlier as well, but it kind of looked as if from the point when the team's shape did change, it looked as if at that point Hearts were saying, Joe, we're happy with the 1-0. Let's hold what we've got, and Joe, we can actually keep these guys at bay. And to be fair, for a long time they did that. I thought that, I don't remember Xander Clark having too many, jaw-dropping saves or anything they had to make. I think all the ones they did make were fairly routine, or you'd expect him to get. So, I think that, in terms of the team's kind of defensive organisation and the shape, I think there are positives to take from that, for sure. But I guess one talking point, again, is something that fans have been speaking about, the introduction of Peter Haring. Now, obviously it's easy in hindsight to point the finger and go, he gave away a stupid penalty, he shouldn't have been playing in the first place. Do you think that that's the case? Should he have been brought on for that game? Are we seeing a decline there?
No, I think I understand the rationale behind the decision. If you think about it, what we were trying to do, particularly in that second half, is sort of almost force Rangers in field and force them to try and play through us, which was working. To be fair, from that point of view, the tweak in the system was definitely working. You could see that Rangers were getting very frustrated. Lundstrom was having a lot of sort of efforts from outside the box. They had to bring off Cantwell, and you could see that they were, really struggling to try and play through us. I think the decision to bring Haring on was because we were still conceding a lot of set plays, particularly corner kicks. And if you look at the bench, you either bring on Haring or you bring on Denham. I understand why they bring Haring on in that situation, and we'll probably go on to discuss the concession of the penalty, but I don't think the concession of the penalty is all just down to Peter Haring as well. I think there's something that we could be doing as a team to try and help negate that situation. But I had no issue with him coming on. Again, it's an individual error, and it's something that I don't think you can really throw in terms of adding it onto the charge sheet for Steven Naismith if you've got one. I don't think that's a good example or one that I would be sort of adding on myself.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the penalty then. Now, Naismith wasn't happy after the game when he spoke about it. He said there was a lot of blocking going on in the box at set pieces throughout the game at both ends, and I think his position was that Haring had been blocked, or perhaps another player had been blocked as the ball came in, and then obviously Haring's pulled down Goldson, I believe it is. So you mentioned it there. You don't think it's entirely down to Haring. Is that what you were thinking of then? Is it this blocking that was going on, or is it something else?
Yeah, so I think blocking does go on in games. Now, I suppose you could look at this decision a number of different ways. VAR, what's VAR supposed to be? Well, it's supposed to get involved in sort of clear and obvious sort of decisions. Now, blocking goes on all the time, week to week. So if you're going to start looking at blocking, I don't know if that's something that falls under the clear and obvious sort of criteria. My initial problem with the situation is we are creating that problem because of the fact that we go 50% zonal, 50% man marking at set plays. So we're always leaving the chance of there being a sort of overload in terms of there being 2-on-1s. And that's what happens here. Haring has Lundstrom and Goldson to try and decide who to pick up. Lundstrom's the one who sort of blocks him off. And as a sort of consequence of that, he sort of has that sort of pull of the, tug of the jersey on Goldson. Now, it is silly on Haring's part. He's experienced enough to know, especially in the age of VAR, that there's every chance that that's going to result in a penalty. But I do think we need to maybe look at the the setup in terms. I'm very old-fashioned. I've said this since the start of the season. I'm very much of the belief that you go man for man at set plays, and then if something goes wrong, it's easy to find that accountability. I think that as soon as you go into this sort of zonal marking, it becomes easy for players to sort of pass on responsibility. That didn't happen here, but you could see that a consequence of that setup has left Rangers to put them in a position where they can sort of put that block in. And clearly they knew that about Hearts, because it wasn't the first time that happened. As Naismith correctly pointed out, it was happening at stages in the first half as well. But then as a manager, you've got to maybe try and think, well, is there something that we can do? You know, control the controllable. You can't control VAR and you can't control referees at Ibrox, but what you can control is how you try and negate that from your end. So yeah, Harren has to take responsibility, but there's maybe something that we need to consider in terms of our setup at set plays to maybe consider moving forward as well.
I think that's an excellent point. I know that defensive set pieces have been a bugbear of fans, you know, even though there haven't actually been that many conceded, but I know obviously the fact that things like the entire team coming back for every free kick, every corner, you know, and like you say, there seems to be a kind of hybrid mix of zonal and man marking, and maybe that's not always getting results. So it's a really interesting point. And obviously at that point, then the ball goes in, it's 1-0. We get the announcement it's going to be 8 minutes of stoppage time.
9, yeah.
9. And then you know the crowd are going bananas. Obviously they're roaring. At that point, did you think Rangers were going to get a second? Do you think that is there a problem with Hearts' response to that goal?
I think we've seen this movie a few times as Hearts fans at Parkhead and Ibrox, so it was always going to be the case that it would probably happen. You know, they get an extra injection. He's sort of energy from that. You know, they were obviously tiring towards the end of the game, given their exploits in Prague, where they had to do so much off the ball, especially for the first sort of 60, 70 minutes of that game. But again, it's just an individual thing. You know, we were in a decent shape defensively as a unit, so I'm not going to put too much onus on the fact that they get that ball in, but Kent just gets caught under it. It's just as simple as that. And he had a great game, and unfortunately, you know, as a defender, there's such a fine line between being hero to zero in games of football. You know, it's a lot easier for forwards to make a mistake and be able to almost recover for that. But when you're a centre half, it's really sort of fine lines between having a good game and a bad game. And our whole defence was really good yesterday, but unfortunately, in that moment, Kent lets himself down, and you know it's an easy header for Daniil at the end.
I think that's it, and you make the good point of the defence did generally play pretty well. I mean, I thought Rose and Kent were both excellent, like throughout the contest. Kingsley looked pretty solid when he came on as well, and then like you say, you know, Kent, who has been excellent at winning his aerial duels, he's been absolutely brilliant. Those are the kind of balls that he's been excellent at just dealing with and getting away, and ever since he's come into the team in the summer. And then, like you say, that's the one time where it's just not quite, he's just not quite got there, and then Hearts have paid the price for it. So, yeah, again, a sore one, definitely, and another, like, definitely, it'll be a game that Hearts fans probably won't forget for a wee while. But I guess, what are your overall thoughts on the game then? You know, do you think that, is this, looking ahead to the League Cup semi-final, you know, would you want Hearts to play in a similar sort of manner once again, or do you think that this shows that maybe there's actually a different approach is required?
I think playing with that back three, and again, it's going to depend on which personnel's available now. We don't know to what extent the injuries of Afaya and Sibic is going to sort of hinder on their availability over the next week. But I think if we do have those players available, then I think there is enough from yesterday to suggest that that's the best way going forward. And in particular, if you consider just how wide apart Hampden is, I think that the way that we managed to get Rangers to sort of almost play through the middle yesterday would be something I'd like to see a repeat of, because they're quite one-paced in midfield. Cantwell's a great player, but he isn't someone that has this sort of like burst of energy or sort of burst of speed or pace. And then you've got behind him sort of Lundstrom and sort of probably not Raskin, because he looked like he picked up a bit of a dull one yesterday, but Ryan Jack in that. I do think that if we can condense Rangers into the middle of the park, then I think we give ourselves a better chance. All we need to try and fix on is what we do when we've got possession of the ball. So again, I'd like to see us play with someone up top, whether it's Vargas, whether it's Oda. I think we need to go with that and have Shankland maybe just being a little bit deeper. But yeah, there's a lot to take positives from. I mean, there's some things we've not really touched on in terms of individuals, but Benny came in and I thought he showed up really well for 60 minutes. I thought Neuenhoff got stronger and stronger as the game went on. He actually showed a good turn of pace at times as well. There was one
moment that caught me off guard as well.
He beat Goldson, who's no slouch, and I was like, that's not something I've really seen much of Neuenhoff so far. So there's individual reasons to be positive, and I think in terms of the overall picture for the season, I don't think yesterday has a huge bearing on that because, again, we didn't learn a lot that was new about Hearts. We have been pretty decent out of possession this season so far, apart from that Celtic game, naturally. But apart from that, we have defended reasonably well. Again, the problem is when we have possession of the ball, and Wednesday's going to present a challenge with regards to that. So I think Wednesday's a bigger sort of gauge on whether we're learning lessons as a management team and a group of individuals since the start of the season, rather than yesterday. Yesterday offers up a little bit of hope for the weekend, and naturally Rangers will have had another week to work under their manager, so I'm sure there's things that he'll have seen that he'll want to tweak as well.
Yeah.
But we have a chance at the weekend. Rangers didn't impress me yesterday, and although you could say a lot about their character because they played until the final whistle, I think that there's reasons to believe that there's an opportunity there to progress to the final.
No, yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think there are. I think, like you say, the work off the ball was really good. A couple of individual mistakes ended up proving costly, as they tend to do. But largely, I think there is room for encouragement there, and I know that. Yes, Rangers had a lot of the ball. Yes, particularly in the second half, Hearts didn't have much of it and didn't make many chances. But you need to remember the state of the game. You need to remember the fact that Hearts are ahead. They're trying to defend the lead, and I think that given those circumstances, I think that actually, there were positives to take. I guess you touched on it just there, but we'll quickly, before we wrap up, we'll have a quick look ahead to Livingston on Wednesday night. You mentioned there that you thought that this game actually will probably be bigger for Hearts' season than Sunday just there. So, what is it you're looking for? What do you hope to see against Livingston?
I think it's trying to see how we can work around this sort of low block to see whether there's something that we've been able to work on in training since that sort of flurry of results at the start of the season where it just looked like we just couldn't cope with it. It was possession for possession's sake, and it was all very just too passive. So it's going to be interesting to see if we've learned any lessons from that, because the final third is still obviously a bit of a talking point. It's great that Shankland's came back into form.
Yeah.
But you take Shankland out of this Hearts squad and, it's quite bare in terms of sort of goal scoring threats. We don't really have a lot coming through the middle of the park. So it's, Wednesday's going to be a difficult game for albeit different reasons to yesterday. I think in terms of where you stand just now on Naismith in this Hearts team, you can either look at it as up until that Old Firm doubleheader, we had 1 defeat in 5. So generally our form had started to, there was a bit of an upturn. There was individual errors throughout those games, notably the Hibs game and then over the last couple of games, but things were starting to improve slightly. Now, if we get a win on Wednesday, you could maybe then look at that and say, well, look, out with the Old Firm games, it's 1 defeat in 6. So if we were to maintain that form over the course of the season, we'll finish closer to third than we will bottom 6, so to speak. I think the problem is, if we don't get a result against Livingston, then that comes on top of 1 goal and 1 point against Kilmarnock, Motherwell, Dundee and St Mirren. That's when it becomes an issue, because that's when, the narrative can change so quickly to, well, it was 1 defeat in 6 to 1 point in 5 against 5 teams that we should really be, getting a better return from. So, Wednesday's massive, just purely because things are on a little bit of a knife edge in terms of whether this is an upturn in form or whether it's just more of the same as what we saw sort of throughout August and September. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, but it is going to be a nervy atmosphere. I think the onus is on the team and on the management team to ensure that we're set up to be very sort of aggressive and on the front foot in the first couple of minutes, because if we don't start the game well, the nerves will just continue. When that first mistake happens, which will inevitably will, or that first loose pass, fans are going to jump on it. So we really need to get a start similar to what we had yesterday, get an early goal, and hopefully we kick on from there, because Livingston's form's also been, very poor. They do look like a team that are regressing. There's been a lot of talk for Martindale. He's cutting a very sort of frustrated figure, and that was in pre-season as well. So clearly, everything isn't going well there. So it's probably as good a fixture we could have hoped for off the back of playing the Old Firm. But yeah, if we don't get a result in this, then I think it's going to be hard to argue fans when they start asking for change, because the evidence will keep coming back to the same result. We don't know how to break teams down when we're given the majority of the ball.
Yeah, I think again, lots of excellent points there. Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with pretty much everything you just said there, Scott. Yeah, I think very, very sensible and level-headed of you. I should say as well before we go that all Heart Standard subscribers have been entered into a draw, and that draw will take place on Wednesday morning, I believe, perhaps Tuesday night, and the winner will get 2 tickets for the Hearts Livy game at the European Executive Lounge. I think that subscribers, every subscriber will be entered into it. If you're not a subscriber and you want to get involved, you've got up until the close of play tomorrow on Tuesday to do that, and you'll definitely be entered into the draw. £1 for 6 months of access, and you might even get a couple of tickets as well. So
here's a good selling point. If you really want to sell it to fans, you'd get closer to the board with those tickets.
That is
not
true.
Not condoning anything, but what I'm suggesting is, if you did have some, legitimate concerns that you wanted to raise, and you wanted to be a bit closer than arm's length to certain individuals, then subscribe to the Standard, get your selling for the draw.
There you go. So yeah, if any fans are wanting to get their feelings known, if they've got a few thoughts and they're not shy about it, that's how you can get it. That's how you can go about it. I'll just quickly run through what we've got on the site as well at the moment. So today we've got an opinion piece from myself, looking back at yesterday's game against Rangers, saying, my thoughts on it are basically that yes, it was a painful end to the game. Yes, it will sting, but actually there's quite a few positives to be taken from it, and that's what Hearts fans really needed, I think, from this game more than anything else, was just something to believe in, and I think Naismith's done that. We've also got our analysis from the game yesterday. We've also got the Q&As with Steven Naismith is on the site. We've got one of Alex Cochrane going up later on tonight. We'll also have an analysis piece digging into the bones of the Celtic game that'll go up tomorrow, and we've also got a piece looking at Hearts' player trading model. I think that'll be going up tomorrow, possibly Wednesday, but that's something to look out for this week. And of course, we'll have all our usual stuff ahead of Livingston game. We'll have the Q&As from the pre-match press conferences. We'll have predicted lineups, and on Wednesday we will be back for the morning briefing, and I believe that Joel will be with us as well. So he'll be back from his holidays, and then we'll be at Tynecastle on Wednesday night, of course, for the Livingston game. So plenty there already on the site to look forward to, plenty more to come in the coming days, and hopefully you guys can enjoy it. But I guess we'll call it a day there, and just let's say thanks again, Scott, for joining us, and hope Hearts fans have a good few days. Cheers.
Cheers.